version of the Bible, the first edition in 1611, guess what? It's got those books that are referred to as the Apocrypha in them. So did the Geneva Bible. So did these other ancient Bibles that were used by the Reformers. Did you know this? It wasn't even until the year 1825 where the British and Foreign Bible Society finally laid down the gauntlet and gave us this standardized list, according to them, of the 66 books that they say belong in the Bible. 1825. Now, where did I get that? Did I just make that up? Actually, I read that in an article on Christianity Today, an evangelical Protestant newspaper or online magazine. And it talks about this issue. And it says this, and I quote, and I'll put the link in the description. So when and where does the Protestant Bible of the 66 books show up? This practice was not standardized until 1825 when the British and Foreign Bible Society, in essence, threw down the gauntlet and said these 66 books and no others. But this was not the Bible of Luther, Calvin, Knox, or even the Wesleys, who used the authorized version. So the authorized version is another way to talk about the King James Version. 1825. Now, think about that for a second. When the charge is leveled against the Catholic Church that you changed the Bible, I want you to imagine if you could get in a time machine, if you grabbed your Dewey Reams version of the Bible, the Catholic Bible, and you grabbed your, let's say I got this here, and it's just a coincidence that they're both the same color, okay? But if you grabbed your NIV Life Application Bible, and I know that a lot of Protestants are going to go, oh, well, we don't like the NIV anyway. Well, whatever. It could be the ESV or whatever version you want, okay? If you grab this and you grab this, the Dewey Reams, and you get in a time machine and you go back, let's just say 800 years, and you said, hey, let's talk about which one of these table of contents that contains the books, which one's more like the ones that you guys have, 800 years ago. There's no doubt in my mind. It's this one. It's this one. You can go back even 600 years, okay? And it's still going to be this one. So, who changed the Bible? It's an incredibly important question for people to deal with. Because, yes, the Catholic Church changed the Bible when they added the New Testament, but ever since they did that, it's pretty much stayed the exact same way, with a few minor revisions here and there, but certainly nothing like where books are added or whatever. It was the Reformers that decided they want to add those books. And you know what? And this has been talked about before, but Luther wasn't happy even with just relegating those books to a different kind of status. He went after some books in the New Testament too. Famously, he called the Epistle of James an epistle of pure straw. He didn't like Jude, and he didn't like the book of Revelation. And it's even well known that in his German translation, which by the way wasn't the first translation out of Latin, it wasn't the first translation, but in his translation, he adds the word in Romans 3:28 alone after when it says faith. He adds faith alone. We're not saved by faith, but faith alone. He added that. Now I know people want to go, well, he only added that because that's what it was trying to say. Well, think about it for a second. And I read Luther's exact words in this matter. And the case he was making, of course, was this is the truer reading of the text. Okay, so you Protestants who want to believe in the infallible, inerrant sola scriptura, are you telling me that God needed Martin Luther almost 1,600 years after St. Paul wrote those words, that God needed Martin Luther that for 1,600 years that we had an inferior translation? So is what you're telling me then that up until Luther did that, was the translation of Romans 3:28, was it wrong? Was it in error? And it wasn't rescued until Martin Luther came along nearly 1,600 years later? Or was it infallible and then Martin Luther added to it and called down those curses that we read about in Revelation for anyone who adds to the readings of the book? Which, of course, Protestants are going to say that means the entire Bible as they see it, not just the book of Revelation, or even the canon that has been accepted by the church for most of the history of the Christian church, but their version that wasn't really thrown down 100% until 1825. Think about it, people. Use your brains. If it was infallible from when it was written down and then Martin Luther added something to it, at what point in time does that change its status as fallible or infallible? You got to think about that stuff. Okay? Now, of course, people want to argue. They want to go back and forth. And listen, my videos, I understand that there are people that disagree. Sometimes people watch my videos and they freak out and they go, but, I disagree. Well, duh. You think I'm stupid enough to think that because I make a video, there's not going to be someone who disagrees? Of course you disagree. But that isn't the important thing. The important thing is that we deal with this question, did the Catholic Church change the Bible? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, no, it was the Reformers and beyond that changed the Bible. Once the Catholics added the New Testament to it in the 4th century and they finalized the canon and we all lived with that and everybody was great. Yes, the Protestants went ahead and changed that. Now, I know that it's fashionable to say, well, you Catholics changed the Bible because, there's always a because here, because the Catholic Church doesn't want people to have the Bible. Because if the regular people see what's actually in the Bible, then they're going to know that the doctrines of the papacy and the Blessed Mother and purgatory and all these things, they're going to know those things are wrong, and they're going to rise up against the Catholic Church and throw this in their face. And all we need is to actually read our Bibles, and the Catholic Church can't stand. That's sort of the narrative that goes along with this idea that, the Catholic Church has suppressed the Bible over the years. Let me tell you something. It's just blatantly ridiculous. If it wasn't for the Catholic Church protecting and preserving and admonishing and devoting monks to their lifelong devotion to preserving and copying down the scriptures by hand, if that hadn't been the thing that the Catholic Church did, then none of us would even have this Bible anymore. It was the Catholic Church who devoted itself so strenuously to the preservation and to the promulgation of the Holy Scriptures. Before there was a printing press, before you could just print off books and send them everywhere, you had to have these monks locked away in these monasteries that devoted their whole lives to copying down, word by word, line by line, God's holy word. Now, does that sound like something the Catholic Church would have done if it were trying ultimately to suppress what the Scripture says? I mean, don't you think the Catholic Church would have been smart enough to look through and go, wait a minute, okay, if we know that our doctrines are unbiblical and we're the only ones that have access to this stuff, in the Middle Ages or whatever, then maybe this would be a good time to go through and start, chucking things and yanking things out and deleting things or whatever. Why wouldn't they have done that? It doesn't make any sense. The fact is, and I'll tell you this, the churchmen of the Middle Ages, they knew their Bibles backwards and forwards better than any of us do. Because that's what they did with their entire lives. That's all they did. The Catholic Church protected this treasure that God gave to the world through the church with everything the church could do. That's why we have our Bibles today. So this ridiculous narrative that the Catholic Church was trying to suppress that and trying to keep people down from reading their Bibles is just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I know people want to say, well, then why weren't there Bibles printed in all these other languages? Well, over time there were. But the fact of the matter is this. Most people who could read Latin. So the official language of the church was Latin. That's what things were printed in. Because if you were an educated person, you could read Latin. So there wasn't this widespread need for all these vernacular translations. But as that need became a thing, then eventually those things would take place. But this idea that the Catholic Church was just trying to keep people away from the Bible, absolutely ridiculous. I know it's what people say. I know it's the narrative. And one of the places where this shows up is in this argument. I'm going to kind of switch gears here for a second. Was that, people say things like, well, yeah, I'll tell you where the Catholic Church changed the Bible, where they deleted something was, look at the 10 Commandments. The Catholic Church has erased the second commandment, which forbids the making of any graven image. And obviously Catholics, have statues. See my video from last time. Catholics have graven images. And in order to, show people that, it's okay for them to do that, they chucked the second commandment, which said, thou shalt not make any graven images. Okay. It's kind of funny. I went on this website yesterday, and it was a website that basically was trying to put forth that thing. And it had the 10 Commandments listed, like the Protestant 10 Commandments. and then the Catholic 10 Commandments. And it was funny because when it got to the second commandment, okay, according to this website, the second commandment was, thou shalt not make any graven images. And then on the Catholic one, it just had the big red words deleted, as though the Catholics took that commandment and deleted it. How ridiculous. Now, let me explain something to everybody that hasn't looked into this for themselves. The 10 Commandments themselves, the numbering of the 10 Commandments, are not found in the Bible. The 10 Commandments come from, Exodus chapter 20, where Moses is given by God this list of thou shalt and thou shalt nots. But the idea of creating 10 commandments out of them is basically like a summary. It's something that people did to try to categorize and summarize this list of thou shalt and thou shalt not. And if you look carefully, there's actually 13 if you wanted to dig into it. But what people have done is they've grouped certain ones together that are dealing with an idea, and they have created this list of 10 things, okay? Now, the Catholic Church basically uses the list that was promulgated by St. Augustine, okay, in the 3rd century. So this, and you know what? So do the Lutherans. They have the same list. And other people have different lists. But ultimately, if you look at the text in Exodus, it's the same. No one took anything out that said anything about making graven images. It's still there. It's just that the Catholics have, in their summary of what is the first commandment, okay, they have included that prohibition of the making and worship of idols into the first commandment about loving the Lord your God and serving him only. Okay, now you might say, well, then how does that equal 10? Well, because the Catholic Church separates the last 2 commandments, and like the Protestant 10 Commandments, or some Protestant 10 Commandments, the one that says that you shall not covet your neighbor's possessions, and then the other one says you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Okay, in the non-Catholic versions of the 10 Commandments, okay, generally speaking, those are listed as one thing. Whereas the Catholic Church makes a distinction between coveting your neighbor's possessions and coveting your neighbor's wife. Those are 2 different things, okay? And if you want to argue about that, I don't really care, okay? But that's the deal. They're all there in both versions. Nobody chucked any of the 10 Commandments, okay? It's just that they're different according to how they're grouped. But why do people get so hung up on that? It's ultimately because that's what fits their narrative. And what's their narrative? That the Catholic Church hates the Bible. That the Catholic Church is afraid of the Bible and doesn't want anybody to know what it really says. Well, let me tell you this. Like I said earlier, if the Catholic Church hated the Bible so much, they're doing a pretty bad job of keeping it from people. They're doing a pretty bad job because every time I go to Mass, you know what we do? We read the Bible a lot. Every time I get together to pray my morning and evening prayer in the Liturgy of the Hours, there's a whole lot of Bible going on there. Okay? If the Catholic Church was so convinced about, getting rid of the Bible, man, they've done a terrible job because they put out more Bibles than anybody. They've protected the Bible more than anybody. They've put as their main focus of everything the Bible more than anybody. So did the Catholic Church change the Bible? Sure did. Gave you the New Testament. Beyond that, not so much. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Have an amazing day, and I appreciate you guys. God bless.